The intimacy Sylvie shared with Julian was a fragile, perfectly constructed cage.
Yeah.
It was built not of steel or wood, but of shared memories, whispered promises, and one enormous, unspoken truth. In their small apartment, tucked away on the 7th floor, the outside world seemed muted, unnecessary. They had everything they needed within those 4 walls: books, silence, and each other's unwavering gaze. For 3 years, Julian believed their love was a pure accident, a cosmic collision of 2 lonely souls who finally found their anchor. I often told Sylvie, "You saved me from the noise." Sylvie would smile, a practiced, luminous expression that never quite reached the deep, shadowed corners of her eyes. She knew the love was real, but the collision had been meticulously choreographed. The secret was a physical thing to her, a cold stone lodged beneath her ribcage. It weighed her down when they danced, and it kept her heart rate subtly elevated even when they slept. Julian, deeply devoted and trusting, never saw the seams. He loved her reliability, the way she knew his needs before he voiced them, the uncanny precision of her affection. He mistook her control for commitment, her careful curation of their life for profound connection. This was the most exquisite form of betrayal, the one cloaked entirely in love. It began to crack on a rainy Tuesday. Julian was looking for an old photo album and opened a cabinet Sylvie usually kept locked. Inside, he found a slim, unfamiliar file. It was beige, crisp, and bore his own name, Julian Allister, typed cleanly across the tab. He didn't open it. The air in the room instantly chilled despite the heating. His heart gave a hard, painful knock against his ribs. Sylvie entered the room, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. She saw the cabinet ajar, the file visible, and the smile died on her face. Her body tensed, a slow, predatory stillness coming over her. It was the first time Julian had ever seen the fragility of her composure shattered. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice a low, flat monotone that lacked all her usual warmth. "Looking for the album," Julian replied, his hands sweating. He backed away from the cabinet, feeling suddenly like an intruder in his own home. Sylvie placed the mugs down with unnatural care. She walked to the cabinet, closed it, and locked it again with a small silver key she wore on a chain around her neck. "That's private," she said, not looking at him. "It's insurance papers. Things you wouldn't understand." The lie was clumsy, uncharacteristic, and chilling. Julian didn't press the issue, but the knowledge of the file became a persistent, buzzing presence in the silence between them. He began watching her, not with accusation, but with a forensic curiosity, trying to locate the source of the disquiet that had invaded their perfect bubble. He noticed the routines, the way she always intercepted the mail, her aversion to talking about their lives before they met, the subtle way she steered conversations away from his own childhood. One evening he mentioned a childhood friend, a boy named Finn. Sylvie's wine glass slipped, leaving a dark blooming stain on the pristine white rug. "I'm sorry, Julian," she murmured, cleaning it frantically. I hate when you dwell on things that are gone." "Finn isn't gone," Julian said gently, kneeling beside her. "He just moved away. Why does that bother you so much?" She looked up at him, and for a fleeting second, he saw raw terror in her eyes. It was gone immediately, replaced by fierce protective tenderness. "It bothers me because I love the U.S. we are now, and I am terrified of anything that might pull you back into the shadows," she whispered, kissing his forehead. The explanation was loving, manipulative, and ultimately effective. Julian swallowed his doubts, letting the torrent of her affection wash away the suspicion. But the seed of unease was firmly planted. Their intimacy, once an open meadow, now felt like a narrow corridor with mirrored walls, reflecting only their own faces. He started having nightmares, not of monsters, but of blank spaces. Dreams where he was a child, calling for parents whose faces he couldn't recall. He woke up gasping, reaching for Sylvie. She would hold him, soothing him with rehearsed phrases, never asking about the contents of the dream, only the panic itself. The file in the cabinet became his obsession. It was the physical embodiment of the lie, the single knot holding their entire interwoven tapestry in place. He realized the claustrophobia he felt wasn't from their apartment, but from the lack of intellectual and emotional freedom she granted him. He was safe, yes, but he was also contained, preserved, like an insect in amber. The amber was Sylvie's creation. One afternoon, while Sylvie was out running an errand, she described in too much detail. Clear attempt to establish an alibi. Julian found the silver key. It was tucked under the small porcelain elephant on her bedside table, a rare lapse in her typically perfect concealment. His hand shook as he inserted the key into the cabinet lock. It turned with a crisp, final click. He pulled out the beige file. He carried it to the window, the harsh daylight feeling like a surgical lamp, illuminating a long-hidden wound. The file wasn't about insurance. It was a collection of documents, altered birth records, forged employment history, and detailed psychological profiles. The profiles weren't about her, they were all about him. Notes on his anxieties, his triggers, his greatest desires. He flipped the pages, reading Sylvie's own handwriting scrawled in the margins. Needs structure. Responds well to stability. Must keep him away from Seattle. It wasn't a dossier, it was a manual. A detailed instruction guide on how to be the perfect partner for Julie and Alistair. But the final, most devastating document was a redacted police report from 10 years ago. A missing person case. The name was scrubbed out, but the details were familiar. Julian's hands felt cold, his breath shallow. The victim's family lived in Seattle. The date was exactly 6 months before he and Sylvie met. He heard the faint sound of the elevator door opening. Sylvie was back, right on schedule. He quickly jammed the file back into the cabinet, fumbling with the lock. He nearly dropped the key, his fingers slick with sudden, horrifying realization. Sylvie walked in, smelling faintly of rain and expensive soap. She paused in the hallway, her head cocked, sensing the shift in the air. "You found something," she stated, her voice calm, devoid of question. She wasn't pleading. She was assessing the damage. Julian turned, holding the canteen of tea she had made earlier. He wasn't crying, but his entire sense of reality was trembling. "The life we have," he managed, his voice barely audible. "It's beautiful, Sylvie. Why did you have to complicate it with lies?" She stepped closer, her expression shifting back into the familiar mask of protective love. "I didn't complicate it, Julian. I created it. The file, the reports. The need to keep me from Seattle. What is it, Sylvie? Did you witness a crime I was involved in?" She shook her head slowly, her eyes filling with genuine tears. Tears born not of remorse for the lie, but fear of losing the fragile construct. "It's the opposite, my love. I needed to protect you, from yourself, from what you almost did." The confession, when it finally came, wasn't a flood, but a series of precise, measured drops, each one poisoning the well of his past. 10 years ago, Julian Alistair had suffered a devastating breakdown, a complete psychological fracture after a family tragedy. The missing person report wasn't the victim's name, it was Julian's. He had vanished, broken, wandering the country, rejecting his identity. Sylvie, a crisis counselor at the time, had been assigned to the case. She was supposed to find him, stabilize him, and return him to his family. Instead, she fell in love with the fragmented, vulnerable man she found. She saw his potential for peace, but only if his past was entirely incinerated. "Your family only saw the wreckage," Sylvie pleaded, her hands reaching for his. "I saw the blueprint for the man you could be, so you erased everything," Julian whispered, taking a step back. "You forged my history. You manufactured the story of how we met." He realized every small detail of their courtship, every accidental meeting, every shared interest, had been seeded by her, based on the profiles in that beige file. The claustrophobia now made chilling sense. He wasn't in a relationship. He was in a rehabilitation program run by his obsessive handler. "The beauty is real, Julian," Sylvie insisted.
"Love is real."
"I just cleared the ground so it could grow, free from the infection of your trauma." Julian remembered the nightmares, the blank spaces. They weren't forgotten memories. They were erased ones. The profound intimacy they shared was a ghost now, replaced by the stark, terrifying realization that he was a stranger, living a borrowed life. "Did you love the real Julian?" he asked, the hardest question he had ever posed. Sylvie hesitated. A long, agonizing silence descended, filled only by the distant hum of the city. "I loved the one I designed," she finally admitted. That single, stark sentence was the true point of no return. It wasn't the deception that killed the relationship, but the admission that her love was conditional on his obedience to her blueprint. Julian looked at the cabinet. The file was the ledger of his life, and Sylvie held the pen. He felt a desperate urge to run, to find Seattle, to find the family and the life she had told him to forget. He knew that the moment he walked out that door, the man Sylvie had built the stable, quiet, loving Julian would dissolve entirely. "You trapped me," he said, his voice flat. "You used my pain as a chain." Sylvie's eyes were frantic now, seeing the edifice crumble around her. She had risked everything for this perfect man, and the perfection itself was the flaw. She reached out, grasping his hand. Her touch, once comforting, now felt like a desperate attempt to plug a leak in a rapidly sinking ship. "If you leave, Julian, you will shatter. You won't know where to go. You won't know which memories are real," and that was the cruelest truth. The betrayal was so complete that his trust in his own mind was compromised. He gently pulled his hand away. The movement was slow, deliberate, the quiet sound of a tether being severed forever. He walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights, feeling the noise of the outside world rush back in, chaotic and real. The claustrophobia lifted, replaced by an overwhelming, terrifying sense of open space, of infinite uncertainty. This was the unraveling, the painful, essential process of ripping away the carefully woven intimacy to expose the raw nerve of betrayal underneath. He turned back to her, seeing her not as his lover, but as the architect of his false reality. He walked out of the apartment, not rushing, not yelling, but simply walking away from the life she had engineered. Sylvie did not follow. She sat down slowly on the pristine white rug, next to the faint dark stain of the wine. She had won the battle for his life, but lost the war for his heart. She was left alone in the perfect cage she had built. Outside, Julian stood on the street, breathing the cold city air. He had no wallet, no plan, and a past that was nothing but redacted files. But he had his memory of the beige folder, the terrible truth of the manual, and the certainty that his future must be built on his own foundation, however shaky. He pulled out his phone, a device Sylvie had given him, programmed only with her number and a few safe contacts. He quickly searched for missing persons report, Seattle, 10 years ago, and hit send. The moment the search results appeared, he dropped the phone into a nearby storm drain, severing the last visible thread. The man who walked away was neither the Julian, Alistair she knew, nor the broken man she had found. He was a new identity, forged in the fire of disillusionment. He walked towards the noise, embracing the chaos, understanding that sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to reopen it completely. Sylvie remained in the apartment, listening to the silence. The secret was out, and it had consumed everything. She knew he would contact his family eventually, seeking answers to the blank spaces she had created. She knew the truth would cause him immeasurable pain, but it was the only way he could ever truly become free. The intimacy they shared was a beautiful lie, a testament to her desperate, misguided attempt to fix a broken soul through control. The lesson learned was painful. True love cannot be built on erased history. It requires acknowledging the trauma, not burying it. In the end, the secret she kept for him wasn't the lie itself, but the painful truth of who he really was before she interfered. And now, she was left with the ruins of a relationship that was perfect in every external detail, yet fatally flawed at its very core. The apartment, once a sanctuary, was now merely a silent mausoleum of their beautiful, terrible experiment. The unraveling was complete. The ultimate betrayal was that the lie was told in the name of love. If this story of obsessive love, psychological control, and ultimate betrayal captivated you, make sure to comment, like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio.